January 23rd was a cold, rainy Thursday in Atlanta, but the terrible weather couldn't dampen my spirits. I just finished lunch with my new business partner, Richard Whitlow, and my father. Richard was my father's old army buddy, and now he was our new partner in a joint venture that could very well take our family business to the next level. My father started this business shortly after he returned from Vietnam. Armed with a contractor's license and a dream, he gathered a few of his army buddies who had some construction skills and began building customs houses. Over the years, the business has grown from a one-man show to a mid-sized regional house builder. By the time I graduated from college and came to work for him in the mid-90s, it was a multi-million-dollar contracting business that included both residential and commercial divisions. My father always believed in hard work and did his best to instill a strong work ethic in all of us kids. I remember going to work with my dad when I was very young, and by the time I was 15, I spent my summers working on one of his crews until I graduated from college. When I graduated from college, I began working full-time for my father as an architect and structural engineer, but my father still insisted that I spend at least a few weeks a year working on the job site. Over the years, I moved up the ranks and finally became president of Trident Corporation when my father retired a few years ago, and I still spend 2 weeks every year working on construction sites. He retained the title of CEO so he could come into the office a few days a week when he needed a break from my mother. Over time, my brother and sister also joined the business, and now my brother Jack is the vice president of engineering and my sister Karen is the director of finance. We still have a division that develops and builds residential complexes, but the bulk of our profits come from our commercial division, where we design and build factories and warehouses, as well as mixed-use developments with apartment buildings, retail, and parking structures. Now, through this new joint venture, we will be able to combine our construction experience with Richard Whitlow's real estate expertise in Florida and the Caribbean. Plans call for several patio communities with a total of 4,000 retirement homes on just over 1,500 acres that Richard wants to develop north of Orlando. But most of all, I was interested in the opportunity to participate with Richard in the construction and management of several elite luxury resorts. They will be built on the basis of a property he bought when property values fell after damage caused by a major hurricane that devastated the Eastern Caribbean about a decade ago. Richard's real estate company owned properties in the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and a private island in the Bahamas. The problem was that Richard had invested all his money in buying the property, and now he had no resources to develop it. So our deal called for Richard's business to be absorbed into ours in exchange for some cash and 25% of the combined business for Richard's daughter, Jackie, to take his place. Our first resort will be in the Dominican Republic, which we will operate with the help of Richard's daughter, who will bring years of property and property management experience to the company. If this first resort works, there are plans to open additional resorts on other properties Richard owns in the Caribbean. I have known Richard and his family since childhood. Richard and his first wife Helen were my parents' best friends, and we always hung out with them. We spent a lot of time with Whitlow, having picnics, holiday parties, and even vacationing together for several years. All of us kids spent a lot of time listening to Richard and my dad tell stories about their time together in Vietnam. But my favorite memories of the Whitlow family are with their daughter Jackie. The same Jackie that I will now have to work with every day. Jackie was a bit of a tomboy growing up, and we loved exploring the woods and streams behind her parents' house. Jackie even played catch with me when I first started playing football. Then, before I knew it, tomboy Jackie turned into a sexy teen Jackie with long, slender legs and incredible breasts. This is where this new business arrangement gets a little awkward because Jackie and I learned about sex together, nervously experimenting with each other. She was the first girl I ever kissed and the first girl who let me touch her body. After all this experimentation, it didn't take long for us to lose our virginities to each other in my parents' basement. When Richard and Helen divorced, Helen received custody of Jackie, and they moved back to Charleston, where Helen's family lived. Richard moved to Florida with his new girlfriend and over the years built a fairly large real estate brokerage company, buying and selling properties throughout Florida and the Caribbean. This is how this last enterprise appeared. Richard was recently diagnosed with cancer and has only 18 to 24 months to live. After he was diagnosed, he approached my father with the idea of merging our two companies. Like Richard, Jackie was a real estate genius, but didn't know the limits. This venture was Richard's grand plan so that he could die knowing that Jackie would be successful for many years to come. I couldn't help but wonder how Allison, my wife, would take it if she ever learned about the history Jackie and I shared. Richard and my father went to visit another old army buddy of his before Richard headed back to Orlando, leaving me to take care of the bills. After I paid, I walked out of the bathroom, thinking about all those days spent in the basement when Jackie would bring one of her dad's magazines, and we would act out the stories we were reading as I heard laughter coming from the bar. It took me a few seconds to find it, but there was no mistaking that laugh. Hell, I've been married to her for the last 22 years. I scanned the entire bar area before noticing that she was sitting at the end of the bar, next to a large wooden column that partially blocked her from view. About 5 years ago, Allison opened her own catering and event management business. Over breakfast, she told me that today she had a meeting with Kevin Richardson, a client of hers who was in town from Chicago to work on plans for a corporate event his company was planning when the Super Bowl came to town in a few weeks. This must be the guy sitting next to her at the bar. I had never seen her at work, and I must admit that I was more than curious to see how she interacted with her clients. So I walked around the bar and slid onto a stool on the other side of the large wooden column, trying not to let her see me. After listening to her talk for a few minutes, I became a little angry. She was a little too flirtatious for my liking, so I pulled out my cell phone and started recording, running it along the edge of the wooden column to make sure he caught every word. We'll definitely talk about this over dinner tonight, and this little recording will be my proof if she tries to play it. I was about to get up and introduce myself to her friend to freshen things up a bit when I heard something that changed the game. "So, Allison, how about we head back to my hotel after lunch?" Kevin asked. "I'm not planning on flying back to Chicago until tomorrow, so I have all day to spare, and I can't think of a better way to spend a cold, rainy day than being in bed with you." "You just don't give up, huh?" Allison asked. "Didn't I tell you before that I couldn't do this? Like I said, I'm a happily married woman, and I'm not going to cheat on Rob." "Come on, Allison. You were married when I was here a couple of weeks ago, and that didn't stop you then. Damn, I'm sure you really enjoyed it then." "Perhaps," Allison replied, "but I told you it was a mistake, a drunken mistake that will never happen again." "You're not going to make this easy, are you?" Kevin asked. "You keep telling me no, but I see it in your beautiful green eyes. You want it as much as I do, you're just resisting to ease your conscience. It's okay, I understand. But believe me, after 5 minutes alone in that room, all your guilt will disappear, and you will be begging me to continue." "Oh God, you're so bad," Allison said with a slight chuckle. "But as tempting as it is, I just can't risk Rob finding out. I already told you it was a mistake, and it won't happen again. I got away with it once, but I'm not willing to risk my marriage for a few hours of fun." "You just need to relax and stop being so paranoid," Kevin said. "Rob knows you have a client in town, so he's sure you're busy all day. Besides, it's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We can go back to my room for 2 or 3 hours of amazing sex, and you'll still have enough time to get home, shower, and cook dinner before he gets home from work. There's no way he'll find out, so what do you say?" At this point, I've heard enough. I stood up, grabbed my phone, and stepped behind the pole that separated us, standing between them and extending my hand to Kevin. Without realizing what had happened, he extended his hand back, thinking that we might know each other. "Good afternoon, Kevin," I said. "You don't know me, but I'm Rob Lawrence. You know, the husband of the lying bitch who sits next to you." Then he realized his mistake, and I saw the horror in his eyes as my large right hand completely engulfed his small, fragile hand and began to squeeze tighter and tighter. All the while, Allison pleaded, Honey, please let me explain. I promise it's not what you think. Kevin tried to free himself from me, but it was no use considering my grip was like a vice, developed through years of hard work in construction as a teenager and lifting heavy weights while playing football for Clemson. He started to twitch, and at that moment I felt something click in his hand, so I let go of his injured hand before turning my attention to Allison. By this point my anger had reached a boiling point, and I shouted at her, "So, my dear, what do you say? Are you going to go to that bastard's room and get him into bed like last time? Don't worry, he promised to bring you home before your ignorant husband finds out." All the while, Allison just continued to sob, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." "No, you damn bitch. You're not sorry. You're only sorry because your lying deceiver got caught," I growled. Suddenly, I realized that there were probably hundreds of eyes looking at me and seeing what a scene I was making. So I took a few deep breaths to get my emotions under control before leaning into Kevin's ear and whispering, "As for you, bastard, thank God when you get home." "Do you know why?" "No," he answered nervously. "Thank God I didn't really lose my temper here. But if I ever find out that you've even talked to my wife, next time I won't be so reserved. Do you understand what I'm talking about?" He nodded his understanding, and I continued, "That's good, because I have literally hundreds of guys working for me who will happily find you and cause as much misery as I say, and that's probably will only cost me a few $100 and a case of beer. Look, I don't want any problems. I promise I will never touch, speak to, or even look at your wife again," he said. "Glad to hear that. So I advise you to get out of here before I change my mind about sparing you today." Kevin Richardson didn't need to be told twice. He stood up from the stool as best he could and hobbled towards the exit. Once I was done with Kevin, I turned to Allison. "As for you, my corrupt wife, why don't you just disappear and end up in hell?" I shouted, leaving the restaurant and getting into the car. I didn't know what I was going to do about all of this, but I certainly wasn't going to see or talk to Allison tonight. So, as I was driving home to pack, I called my executive assistant, Jessica, and asked her to book me a room at the Hyatt for the next few nights. After finishing my conversation with Jessica, I decided to turn off my phone to avoid the constant stream of calls from Allison that had already begun. Once home, I packed enough clothes to last me a few days and then headed back downtown to check into my hotel. After checking in and unpacking, I realized it was almost time for dinner. I didn't have much of an appetite, but I really needed a drink, so I went across the street to the bar to have a few drinks. I don't know how long I was there before she showed up, but at some point a very attractive brunette walked into the bar, sat down on the stool next to me, and ordered a Manhattan. "So you're in town for a personnel conference?" she asked. At first I wasn't sure who she was addressing, but when I realized that we were the only two sitting here, I replied, "Sorry, I didn't immediately realize that you were addressing me. But no, I'm not at the conference. I live here. But I take it you're here because of the conference." "Yeah, I was supposed to fly home tonight, but apparently that front that brought the cold rain to Atlanta brought a real snowstorm to Boston, so my flight was canceled." She took a sip of her drink and continued, "Excuse me, where are my manners?" "I'm Rachel," she said, holding out her hand. "Hello, Rachel." "I'm Rob," I replied, shaking her hand. "Well, Rob, what made a nice, married man like you end up in a bar in this weather on a Thursday night?" she asked. "I thought someone like you should be at home having dinner with the family." "You know, Rachel, this is what I usually do, if it weren't for the fact that right now I can't bear the thought of being in the same house as my cheating wife, let alone in the same room with her." We continued talking for the next few hours, and I bought her a few drinks. As the evening went on, the flirting became more obvious, and she made it clear that, despite the ring on her finger, she was willing to spend the night in my hotel room, helping me forget about my problems. It is obvious that she and her husband had some kind of tacit agreement about what happened during her business trips. By midnight, we were both pretty drunk, and she was getting more and more insistent when someone sat down on the bar stool on the other side of me. "Rob, honey, can we talk?" I heard Allison's voice. Before I could respond, Rachel intervened, clearly not wanting to waste the opportunity she had spent the entire evening pursuing. "Look, lady, I don't know who you are, but why don't you find yourself another man, because this one belongs to me, or at least he's mine for the night." My intoxicated brain was still trying to comprehend the situation when Allison sharply replied, "No, honey, this man belongs to me. In fact, he has been my husband for 22 years, and as far as I know, he is still my husband." Suddenly, my anger returned, clearing my mind of the alcoholic haze, and I grabbed Rachel's hand, dragging her towards the exit. We walked a few meters away when I stopped and turned to Allison, shouting, "You know, you have the nerve to come here. You clearly didn't care about our marriage while you were having sex with that bastard behind my back. And now it suddenly becomes important to you. Well, to hell with you." Allison stood there, stunned, as Rachel and I crossed the street, holding each other's hands. As we walked through the doors of the Hyatt, I looked back one last time to see her standing on the sidewalk in front of the bar, watching us. Once we were inside, we headed straight to the elevators. As soon as the elevator doors closed, Rachel wrapped her arms around me and kissed me on the lips. Throughout the 10 floors, we kissed like a couple of horny teenagers until the doors finally opened and we hurried to my room. Rachel stood up and began to pull me toward the bed. Oddly enough, I was able to pull myself together and stop her before things went too far. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this," I said. "You are so beautiful and sexy. You are so seductive. Damn it, I want this so bad it hurts, but I just can't." "I don't quite understand," she said. "Just a second ago, you seemed quite happy." "I know it doesn't make sense even to me, but I just can't. No matter how much my wife hurt me, no matter how much I wanted to do this in order to heal my wounded pride, I know that this is wrong. Look, I'm not judging you. Gosh, I don't know what understanding you and your husband have about your marriage. But when I got married, I swore to Allison and to God that I would be faithful to her and no one else. And even if she broke her vow, I intend to keep mine, at least until our divorce is finalized." "Well, if that's how you feel, I'll leave," Rachel said. "Just know that you are missing out on the best sex of your life." I watched as she closed the door on her way out, thinking she was probably right. Everything about her radiated sexuality, and I might regret letting her go in the morning, but I knew I couldn't live with myself if I let her stay. That night sleep never came. I tossed and turned, constantly replaying Allison's conversation with Kevin Richardson in my head. Nothing fits in my head. Allison has always been a good wife. So what happened? Why did she do this? Was she unhappy or bored or didn't love me anymore? Finally, around 5 in the morning, I gave up and decided to shower, get dressed, and head to the office. My office was my sanctuary. When the children were growing up, this was the only place where I could be alone with my thoughts. I would close the door and sit on the couch in the corner, just thinking and dealing with whatever life was throwing at me at that moment. That's exactly what I was doing when I finally decided to take my phone out of my briefcase and check my messages. I waited and waited while it downloaded all the missed messages. When he finished, I saw that I had 30 missed calls from Allison since yesterday, 3 from my son RJ since last night, and 2 from my daughter Carly this morning. RJ was a senior in high school and still living at home, and Carly was a sophomore at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I looked at my watch and saw that it was almost 8. RJ should be at school by now, so I just texted him that I was fine and that I would see him at his basketball game that evening. I had just hit send when the phone rang again. When I looked, I saw that it was Carly calling again, so I decided to answer. "Good morning, sunshine. How is my beloved child this morning?" "Hello, Dad. I'm fine. The question is, how are you?" "Well, to be honest, dear, it could have been better. But this is no reason to worry. Dad, Mom called and told me what happened last night. Are you sure you'll be okay?" "I'm sure, dear. But I'm wondering, what exactly did your mom tell you about what happened last night?" "She called to see if I had heard anything about you." When I said I hadn't heard, she admitted that she had done something very bad and hurt you. and that she was worried about you because she couldn't find you anywhere. I suggested she go online and look at your bank account to see if you used your credit card. When I asked her what she did, she admitted that she cheated on you with some of her clients. What a bitch she is. I can't believe she could do this to you. I understand how you feel, dear. I can't believe it either. But listen, Carly, this has nothing to do with you and RJ. This is between me and your mom. I'm a grown man and I can handle this myself, so you don't have to worry about me. Is it clear? Yes, Dad, it's crystal clear. But look, I know she still loves you. She was hysterical last night, going on and on about how she hated herself for what she did to you. Anyway, I have to go, otherwise I'll be late for class. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I plan to return home this afternoon, so I'll see you over the weekend. Okay? Be careful on the road and remember that I love you. I love you too, Dad. See you tonight. Bye. I spent the rest of the morning alternating between trying to concentrate on work and trying to figure out what to do with Allison. I picked up the phone 5 or 6 times to call. Mark Johnson, my lawyer, asked him to start preparing the divorce papers. But every time I stopped before I could dial the number completely. This cycle continued until the early afternoon when Jessica knocked on the door and looked in at me around 3:30 p.m. Boss, I'm sorry to bother you, but I didn't know what else to do. Your wife is sitting in the waiting room and refuses to leave until she talks to you. Crap, how long has she been sitting there? She's been sitting there for an hour. I even threatened to call security, but she said that I could do what I wanted, but she would have to be taken out of here by force. Do you still want me to call security? No, you don't need to do that. Wait until 4 p.m., and if she's still here, I guess I'll have to let her in. Okay, but if you change your mind, let me know. I knew she wouldn't leave, but I still hoped she would change her mind. However, at 4 p.m., Jessica knocked on the door again to report that Allison was still in the waiting room. Well, you can't say we didn't try, right? I think she just won't give up, so you might as well let her in. I was still sitting on the couch when the door opened and Allison walked hesitantly into the office, closing the door behind her. Hello, Rob. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Can I sit down? Of course, I said, pointing to the chair opposite. Don't you have to be at work? I'm sure Kevin needs you for something. I knew it was a low blow, but I didn't care. Rob, please. I didn't come here to argue with you. Damn it, I have no excuses. There's nothing you can say or do that I don't deserve. But can I just say what I want to say, and then I'll leave? Well, it's not like you left me much choice. You refused to leave and threatened to make a scene if I didn't meet with you. So go ahead and say what you need. Rob, I know I really messed this up. What I did was wrong, and I have no excuses. I don't know how much you heard yesterday, but I swear to you, it only happened once. Yes, I heard that, but it almost happened again, didn't it? Yes, she said embarrassedly. I've been beating myself up every day since it happened, and I swore it wouldn't happen again. But to be honest, when I went to lunch yesterday, I knew that Kevin would insist that I go back to his hotel, and on some level, to be honest, I knew that I would eventually give in. No doubt, you don't need to be a genius to do this. Look, Rob, I've been trying to figure out for the last few weeks why I did this, but that's not why I came. I have thoughts about why this happened, and I would like to tell you about it, but now is not the time for that. I just wanted to talk to you before you talk to your lawyer. I know you well enough to know that once someone loses your trust, it is almost impossible for them to regain it. And I know that what I did was a betrayal of your trust. But I want to beg for the opportunity to earn your trust again. All I ask is that you give me a few months until RJ graduates from school. If you still feel the same way, I will agree to whatever you want. To be honest, Allison, I really think it's a waste of time, but I'm willing to keep that option open for now. I can't imagine how you can win back my trust after what you did, but I guess I can give you the next 4 months to try. Thank you. This is more than I deserve. Oh, and just so you know, I called Kevin's secretary and told her I wouldn't be able to organize their event and recommended my friend Carolyn instead. I think this is a good start, but it's not about Kevin. It's about you. It was you who lied to me. How can I be sure that you won't just find another lover and lie to me again? I asked. I saw pain flash across her face as she replied, I guess you can't be sure. But I'm going to work every day for the next 4 months to regain your trust. And by the way, I told Carly last night exactly what I did and made sure she understood that it was entirely my fault. Yes, I heard about it. I talked to her this morning. Well, I haven't had a chance to talk to RJ yet, but I will do it this weekend, and I promise that he will also understand that this is entirely on me. I think this will be a good start. Well, anything else? She paused for a moment to gather her courage before asking, Rob, are you going home soon? I don't think so. I think it's best if we stay apart for a few weeks so I can think about all this and then we can talk. Oh, and Allison, there is one condition. I'll call Mark Johnson and ask him to draw up the divorce papers. At best, they will not come into force until the summer. You have time before the divorce is finalized to convince me that I can trust you and that we can get back to some kind of happy marriage. I really have nothing to lose, and it's worth it to be able to walk away for a few months with a clear conscience, knowing that I did everything I could to save our marriage. But if you don't sign these documents when he brings them to you, I'll leave so quickly your head will spin. Understood? If this is what you need, then good. Thank you. Again, this is more than I deserve, she said. She walked to the door and was about to leave, but she stopped and turned to me. Rob, about that woman you were with last night, I'm sorry I put you through this. I don't know what you did when you left with her, but whatever it was, it's also on my conscience. Well, to be honest, it's none of your business after what you did. But just so you know, I didn't sleep with Rachel. I may have let some things go further than they should have, but I sent her to her room before things went too far. Allison did what I asked her to do and signed the divorce papers, asking Mark for only one change. I suggested splitting everything in half since we live in a state with a no-fault divorce law, but probably out of guilt, she asked him to change the split to 60-40, with me keeping 60% if I let her live in the house until RJ finished college. We could then sell it and split the proceeds 60-40 like everything else. I have to admit, Allison kept her word. She tried her best to regain my trust. Honestly, it even got a little annoying when she was constantly checking to make sure I knew where she was and who she was with 24/7. I never told her that she didn't have to worry about reporting because I hired a private investigator to follow both her and Kevin Richardson. He found no further contact between them and found no evidence that Allison had ever done anything like this before or that she was doing it now. I can't say the same about Kevin. It's only been a few weeks since the detective sent me photos of Kevin entering a hotel room with 2 different women. I couldn't help but feel sorry for his wife, so I asked the detective to forward her the photos along with a copy of the conversation I recorded between him and Allison. Last I heard, she divorced him after suing him for most of his assets. As for Allison, she really tried, and there was a part of me that admired her dedication. She even saw a counselor for several sessions to figure out why she cheated and how to avoid it in the future. But this was not enough for me to overcome my pain and mistrust. So a week after RJ graduated from high school in June, our divorce was finalized. The first few weeks after my divorce were harder than I thought. Allison and I have been inseparable since our 3rd year of university. 6 months after graduating, we got married and moved to Atlanta so I could start working with my dad. And this was the first time in my life that I had to live completely alone. Finding myself alone, I thought a lot about Allison and me. We were both athletes in university. I played football as a tight end and Allison played volleyball. We got married shortly after graduation and had Carly a couple of years later and RJ shortly after that. After 2 pregnancies in a row, Allison gained a little extra weight and struggled to lose it for a long time. I always knew it bothered her, but to me, she was still beautiful. To make matters worse, I have always been able to maintain my muscular physique with minimal amounts of fat. Even now, at 45, I still weigh the same 102 kilograms that I did at university. Allison had been struggling with those extra 10 or 15 kilograms for 20 years. She was never big, but she was always insecure about her weight. A few years ago, she took her diet and exercise seriously and lost those same 15 kilograms. This seemed like great news, but now I know it was the beginning of her downfall. Kevin worked in the marketing department of a large telecommunications company and hired Allison to organize and host a party for the company's employees at the Super Bowl. Once they started working together, he started flirting with her constantly and telling her how beautiful she was. For the first time in years, Allison felt attractive and enjoyed the attention. For years, she said, she felt like she couldn't measure up. I was a successful businessman who still looked like an athlete, and she was a plump housewife. Because of my position, we constantly attended various events, and she said that she always felt out of place among the other wives, many of whom were thin, like models. I never saw it that way, but it always bothered her. The day she cheated, Kevin had just signed a contract with her to throw a party. Kevin, Allison, and several of her co-workers went to a bar near his hotel to celebrate. They drank a few cocktails, and the other girls began to go home until Allison was left alone with him. They continued drinking, and by the time they decided to go out, Allison was unable to drive. According to her, she doesn't remember all the details, but somehow she ended up in his room, where he started kissing her and stroking her back, and they ended up in bed having sex. Alcohol, of course, lowered her inhibitions and made her vulnerable to his advances, but Allison took full responsibility for what happened. She knew what she was doing was wrong, but she also liked to feel wanted by someone other than me, who she felt should love and desire her despite her appearance, because I was her husband. It was only when she began to dress to leave that she fully realized the gravity of what she had done. She was lucky that I was away, so she went home and cried all night. She took the next day off to collect her thoughts before I returned home. She knew how I would react if I found out what happened, so she decided it was best to just keep it a secret and hope I never found out. She swore it wouldn't happen again and tried to chalk it up to a drunken mistake. I didn't like it, but I understood how it could happen. I often went on business trips and also flirted with women in bars. But luckily, I was always careful not to drink too much and never let a woman enter my hotel room. Over the next few months, we both got used to the new routine and tried our best to remain friends for the sake of the children. The work kept getting busy as our new project in Orlando began to gain momentum, and we were already finalizing the final plans to begin construction of a new resort in the Dominican Republic. We saw each other several times over the summer, while Carly was home for the holidays. They had a few barbecues, and I would go to their pool on the weekends when I was in town. But all this concerned only children, and there was always some awkwardness between Allison and me. On the Monday that our divorce was finalized, I flew to Orlando for the first time for 2 days to break ground on the first phase of construction on an apartment complex, and then was about to fly to the Dominican Republic to meet with local officials to discuss plans for a resort. My plane landed in Orlando around 3:30 p.m., and I headed to the hotel to check in. The first planning meeting wasn't scheduled until the next morning, so I went down to the bar to have a drink and clear my head for the next day. I had just ordered my second drink when I felt someone touch my shoulder. "Hello, Rob. Long time no see. Do you mind if I sit down?" I heard a voice. I turned around and saw Jackie Whitlow, still looking gorgeous. "Of course, sit down." "Wow, how many years have passed?" I answered. The next few hours felt like I was back in my teenage years, as we shared everything that had happened in the years since she and her mother moved to Charleston. We talked about college, my marriage to Allison, her divorce from Mark, my children, and our new venture that our fathers had dreamed of. It was great to talk to my childhood best friend again. Around 10 p.m., as I was finishing my fourth or fifth drink, Jackie put her hand on my thigh and said, "You know, Rob, I was sitting here and remembering your parents' basement. Do you remember how much fun we had there?" "Of course, I remember. I was so naive, and you were constantly stealing those damn magazines from your father and trying to act out all the stories from their pages with me." For some reason, you thought this was how adults had sex, I joked. I know. We were so young and inexperienced. But, a lot of time has passed since then. Yes, passed. Now, we're not kids anymore, and if you agree, I'd love to show you what I've learned over the years, she said, slowly moving her hand higher up my thigh and smiling mischievously. Well, it's a tempting offer, but I'm not sure it's a good idea, Jackie. My head is still reeling from the divorce, and we need to work together. I just don't think we should start this kind of relationship. You're so cute, she said, laughing. Listen, dear, I'm not looking for a relationship. I just want to play with you again. So how about this, so you could take me to your room and give me a chance to show you what I've learned since we were teenagers? I'm sure I can make you forget about all your problems. Well, I see that some things don't change. You're just as restless as you were in high school. Oh, you have no idea. But if you're lucky, I'll show you how bad I can be. Well, are you going to continue to sit here, or are you going to take me to my room to really fuck me? She didn't ask twice. I quickly paid the bill and, taking her hand, led her to room 1246. By the time the door closed behind us, we were already tearing off our clothes and throwing them on the floor at the end of the bed. Laying her head on my shoulder, she said, "Damn, that was good." We lay there for a while, catching our breath. We just laid there for a while, her head resting on my shoulder. It was a wonderful feeling to feel a warm female body next to me again. Over the next 4 months, I traveled to Orlando about once every 2 weeks, spending my days working on the project and my nights having sex with Jackie Whitlow. I never perceived what we had between us as anything more than friendship with benefits. But damn, what privileges these were. Jackie was never boring in bed, and every time we were together, she pushed my boundaries a little. To be honest, she even persuaded me to have a threesome with her friend Tanya several times. I always thought that Jackie was the most sexually free woman I had ever met. But then I met Tanya, and she took it to a whole new level. There was nothing she wasn't willing to try. When I was home, I would see Allison around town from time to time, but mostly I was just working and trying to move on. Towards the end of September, I started to feel a little lonely since the kids were both away from home at school, so I called them and invited them to spend their fall break in Florida. They happily agreed, and I got busy booking flights and renting accommodations for a weekend in Key Largo, scheduled for the second weekend in October. When that weekend came, I left Orlando and drove to the Miami airport to pick up the kids. I rented a 4-room houseboat and a 30-foot catamaran. I didn't know how to sail a sailboat, but Jackie had a captain's license and was happy to come along and be our captain for the weekend. We had a great time sailing, fishing, and snorkeling throughout the day. In the evenings, we played cards and talked about the good times and holidays we had growing up. Overall, it was a great 4 days, and the kids really liked Jackie because, to be honest, she acted more like them than like a 45-year-old woman. When they left for home on Tuesday, I stayed an extra day to wrap up some business in Orlando on Wednesday and then was heading back to Atlanta the next day. That evening, after the kids left, Jackie and I did what we always did when I was in town. We had dinner, had a couple of cocktails, and had sex until we were completely exhausted. Around 11 p.m., Jackie got up and started getting dressed to go home. Before leaving, she came and sat next to me on the bed and took my hand. "Rob, can I ask you one question?" "Of course. What is it?" "I know it's none of my business, but what the hell are you doing here?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what the hell are you doing here with me when it looks like you're still in love with your ex-wife?" "Look, Jackie, I don't know what you think or saw, but I'm sure you're wrong." "No, Rob, listen to me. All weekend I heard you and the kids talking about all the good times you had as a family, and all those memories included Allison, and you may not have realized it, but your eyes lit up every time you talked about her. I know she hurt you, but even good people make mistakes. This doesn't make her a bad person. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if I were you, I would find a way to truly forgive her. And then, when you get home, I would call her and ask her out." "Date? You mean a real date, like when we first met?" "Yes, a date, a real date. I think after everything that's happened, your old marriage is dead. But that doesn't mean you two can't start over and build something new. Damn, Jackie, I don't even know what's going on with her right now. As far as I know, she has already met someone else and moved on. Well, you'll never know until you ask. Just promise me you'll think about it. Okay, I'll think about it. Great. Now you'll have a safe flight in the morning, and I'll talk to you in a few days. I barely slept that night. There were hundreds of reasons running through my head as to why I should ignore Jackie's advice and just move on. But I kept coming back to what she said, and she was right. I still loved Allison and probably always will. But will I ever be able to trust her again? I continued to hesitate throughout the morning flight, but finally decided what to do as I walked through the airport to baggage claim. Having made my decision, I found an empty space in the terminal and dialed her number. I just stared at the screen for a few seconds, not believing that I was actually going to do this. Finally, I plucked up the courage and pressed the call button. Hello. Hello, Allison. It's me, Rob. Hello, Rob. What's happened? Nothing. I just landed and was wondering if you were free for lunch today. I'd really like to talk to you about something. Of course, I think I can have lunch. I'm working from home today, so nothing urgent. Where do you want to meet? How about Sullivan's an hour? Okay, Sullivan's sounds great. See you there. I collected my luggage and picked up my car from the long-term parking lot before heading to my apartment to drop off my things and freshen up a bit after the flight. I had plenty of time to change and make sure I looked and smelled my best before I had to leave for lunch. I was sitting at a table by the window when she entered. Okay, that's all. You can handle it. Relax and act natural, I told myself as I watched her approach the table. Hi, Rob, she said when I stood up to hug her. Hello, Allison. Wow, you look great as always. Please sit down, I said, pulling out a chair for her. Now you're scaring me. Since you were showered with compliments, then you must be trying to tell me something bad. No, nothing wrong, and I really mean it. You look great. We ordered lunch and talked a little about the children. I told her about our vacation in Key Largo. We laughed and reminisced about old times, and everything was the same as before. Finally, when the waiter took away our empty plates, I plucked up the courage to ask my question. I think you're probably wondering why I called you today. Yes, to be honest, it surprised me a little. Well, I know we haven't seen each other or talked much lately, but that doesn't mean I haven't thought about you. I don't know if this is good or bad. To be honest, I'm afraid to find out what exactly you were thinking about. No, nothing bad. I was just remembering all the good times we've had over the years, and this past weekend with the kids really drove home how I feel. Allison, I asked you out today to ask if you would like to go on a date with me. In particular, I was hoping that you would be free tomorrow evening. She paused for a moment before answering. So this will be a real date. I was hoping it would be like this. But if you're dating someone, I understand. Oh God, that's not the point at all. I didn't even think about dating anyone. After the divorce, I decided that I needed to be alone for a while after everything that happened. I just didn't want to get my hopes up too high until I knew what you meant. Great, then can I pick you up at 6? 6 sounds good. What should I wear? I haven't thought about it yet, but what about something casual, like that pub you like in Alpharetta? That sounds great. She reached across the table and took my hand. When I looked at her, I saw tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Rob. You have no idea how much this means to me. This was the first of several dates we would arrange on subsequent Friday nights. On the third Friday, we went to a restaurant for dinner and then to a club to dance. When I took her home, she invited me over for a glass of wine, and I thought, damn it, why not? We actually had a few drinks, and before I knew it, we were making out like we did in college days on the living room couch. It felt so good to hold her in my arms again. She pulled her lips away from mine and pressed my face to her neck. Oh, damn, Rob, I need you so much. Please don't stop, she begged. I need to feel you inside me right now. Unlike the last time we tried before the divorce, I wanted it just as much as she did. Thanks to Jackie, I finally gained confidence in myself as a man. For the first time since I overheard her conversation with Kevin Richardson, I was able to put thoughts of them aside and just focus on Allison. I quickly stood up and took off my clothes while she pulled her dress over her head and took off her bra. When I finished undressing, I helped her take off her panties, throwing them on the floor and laying down next to her on the sofa again. And I can't say that we made love that night. It was rough, physical, but it was exactly what we both needed to regain what we thought was lost. It was the first of many nights spent together at her house over the coming months, and every time we were together, thoughts of her and Kevin were pushed further into the background. During this period, I stopped traveling to Orlando to spend as much time as possible with Allison. Besides, I wasn't sure how I could handle meeting Jackie in person. My brother Jack took on a project in Florida and a resort in the Dominican Republic because both projects had reached a stage where his engineering skills were most needed. I was still on the phone with Jackie and working with her on the business aspects of both projects. But there was no real reason to travel to Florida. I focused on our new projects in the Atlanta area and let Jack focus on Florida. In January, while Allison and I were still dating, I invited her to come with me to the Dominican Republic for the grand opening of the first phase of our resort. She was excited about the trip, and so was I, although I was a little nervous about her meeting Jackie. In fact, I was planning to ask Allison to marry me again while we were at the resort, with the idea of returning to the beach ceremony in the summer with just the two of us and the kids. But before I did, I felt like I had to tell her about my relationship with Jackie so we could start over with no secrets. So we were sitting on her couch a few days before we left when I finally got up the courage to talk to her about Jackie. "Allison, I need to talk to you about something before we leave on our trip," I said. "Okay, I have all your attention. What do you want to tell me?" I need to tell you something about our new business partner, Jackie Whitlow," I said with excitement, feeling the sweat begin to form on my forehead. I was still trying to decide how exactly to explain everything that happened between me and Jackie when she suddenly burst out laughing. This was absolutely not what I expected. Every time she looked at my face full of confusion, her laughter only intensified. "I don't understand what's so funny," I finally said. "Maybe you can explain to me what's so funny about this." "I'm sorry, dear," she finally said, still trying to hold back her laughter. "You just look so cute when you're nervous. But look, you don't need to explain anything to me about Jackie Whitlow. I already know everything about you too." "Seriously? Maybe then you can explain to me how you know all this." "Rob, did you really think I wouldn't see all those photos Carly posted on Instagram while you were in Key Largo?" "What photographs?" I asked. "You know that I hate all these social networks. They weren't anything terrible. Most of them were pictures of Carly and RJ with you, but in some of them you and your new friend were in the background and looked very close. It all seemed pretty clear that she was more than just a business partner. So when you came home the next week and asked me out, I decided to find out everything about your friend before I let myself get carried away. I'm even afraid to ask, but what exactly did the children tell you about her?" "They said they really liked her. They also said that you were good friends growing up, and that she has some funny stories about you from back then." "Yes, we are really good friends, and this is much more than just work. I don't know if you remember her father, Richard, when he came to visit my father, but their family was very close to ours when I was growing up. Hell, she was probably my best friend until they moved during my senior year. I know all this. Moreover, I even talked to her personally." "Wait, did you talk to Jackie?" I asked in shock. "When? How?" "When I called her honey. After our first few dates, I wanted to find out what was going on between you two before getting serious. So I tormented Carly until she gave me Jackie's number and I called her." "Oh, damn. So you knew about Jackie and me all this time?" "Yes, dear. I knew everything, and I'm still here with you. I understand everything. I can't say that I'm delighted with what happened between you, but I realized that we were divorced at the time and you didn't do anything wrong. Besides, as far as I can tell, Since we started dating again, you have stopped all personal relations with her, so I have no problem if this continues. I can't believe that I was afraid of this conversation for so long, and then it turns out that you knew everything. I probably should have been angry, but honestly, it's a huge relief. Okay, so now you don't have to worry, she said. Now come here and kiss me. I've probably never hugged her so tightly. This was no longer the same woman I had once married. That Allison would never have had the confidence to make that call and have that conversation with Jackie. I really thought I liked this new Allison even more than the old one. When we settled back on the couch, I put my arm around her and she snuggled up against me. I was just starting to relax when she suddenly said, "So now that you've gotten this Jackie story out of the way, maybe you want to tell me about her friend. I think her name is Tanya. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.